Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week. If you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment down below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. Today I'll be showing you how to make a crochet hoodie. Hoodies are a staple in my wardrobe, and I love baseball tees, so we did a little fusion dance, and here we are. We've got some texture on the sleeve and hood with the clean ribbing making up the body, and we kept the length slightly cropped with no band for a bit of flirtiness and a breeze. Speaking of, if you're looking for an easy breezy project, you're in the right place. We've got hundreds of modern crochet designs for beginners to the most advanced among us, with many on the way, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it, or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now it's time to get on the show, so without further ado. For this project, any category 3 yarn will work, but I used a total of 775 grams of yarn, and that's 1,000 yards if you're stateside, and the individual measurements will be on the screen. As for tools, a 5mm hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us your favorite comedy. A movie that I can always watch to get me in a great mood is Grown Ups. I love wholesome family fun. Details for the giveaway down below. We're using 4 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, half double crochet, and double crochet. This tutorial is for a size small, but you can adjust it for your size, and we explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting this top started, we're all going to grab our category 3 primary color yarn and make a slip knot. Next, we're all going to grab our 5mm hook and start off by making a chain that starts 1 inch underneath our underarm down to where we want the bottom of this top to be. Now I'd like for mine to be cropped, so I'm going to start by making a chain of 35, and that's just about 8 inches or 20 centimeters. And I already have this first portion all finished up, so I'm just going to be doing a sample size with you. Now that we have our chain, we're going to block off that last chain and then do a chain 2. Now that chain 2 doesn't count as a stitch, we just need the height, and from here we're going to yarn over, preparing for a half double crochet, and insert our hook into that chain that we blocked off, or the 3rd chain from our hook. So bring your hook down into that chain, we're going to yarn over and pull through. Once we have those 3 loops on our hook, yarn over, pull through all 3. Let's do that again. Yarn over, insert your hook into that following chain, pull through all 3, and continue to put 1 half double crochet into every chain, leaving the last one. Now that we've put 1 half double crochet into every chain, leaving the last one, we're now going to do an increase of 3 half double crochets. So yarn over, insert your hook into that last chain with your first half double, also into that same last chain with a 2nd half double, then into that same last chain with a 3rd half double crochet. For this portion, every odd number row is going to end on an increase of 3, and then every even number row is going to start with an increase of 2. So to get started on a row 2, we're going to chain 2, still doesn't count as a stitch, and flip our work. Into the last stitch from our previous row, an increase of 2 half double crochets. Yarn over, insert your hook into that first stitch with our first half double, and then into that same stitch with our 2nd half double. From here, continue to put 1 half double into every stitch. At the end of the row, chain 2, flip our work, put 1 half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last stitch to increase together once more. We are nearly finished with our row 3. We should all have 1 stitch left, and like I said, at the end of every odd number row, we're going to do an increase of 3 half double crochets. So yarn over, into the last stitch, we're going to insert with 3 half double crochets. There's my first. There's my second. And then there is my third. Every even number row is going to start with an increase of 2. So chain 2, flip our work, and put 2 half double crochets into that first stitch. Then from there, put 1 half double crochet into every stitch. At the end of the row, chain 2, flip our work, and then repeat our 2 previous rows until this portion can reach from mid-underarm and the point can reach the base of our neck. And I will meet you back along the top or the increase end. And a quick sizing tip, we want to make sure that we keep the first row of our underarm just about 1 inch underneath our underarm, because if we have too many rows, then it's going to result in a bigger armhole. My underarm portion is all finished up. I have a total of 11 rows. My width is just about 3.5 inches or 9 centimeters, and we all should have ended along the top. From here, we're going to do half double crochet rows working across our chest until we reach the other side of the base of our neck. So all we're going to do from here, chain 2, flip our work, and put 1 half double crochet into every stitch. At the end of the row, chain 2, flip our work, and put 1 half double crochet into every stitch again. I will meet you back on the other side of the base of our neck along the bottom so we can do the decrease of our underarm together. So my neckline is all finished up. I have a total of 28 rows. My width is just about 8.5 inches or 22 centimeters. Now we're going to start on the other side's underarm. Since we all should be along the bottom, chain 2, flip our work, and then put 1 half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last 3 so we can decrease together. We've made our way up with our half double crochet row. We have 1, 2, 3 stitches left, so let's do our decrease of 3. Starting with the yarn over, insert your hook into that third to last stitch, pull through, into that second to last stitch, pull through, and then into that last stitch, pull through. We should have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 loops on our hook. When we do, yarn over, pull through all 5. That is our decrease of 3 half double crochets. Now our following row is going to start with a decrease of 2 half double crochets. We're basically doing the same thing that we did for the other underarm portion, but instead of increases, we're doing decreases. So after our chain 2, flip your work. Now during our decrease of 2, start with yarn over and insert your hook into that last stitch from our previous row, pull through. Also insert your hook into that following stitch, pull through. When we have those 4 loops on our hook, yarn over, pull through all 4, and 1 half double crochet goes into every stitch for the rest of the row. At the end of the row, chain 2, flip our work, put 1 half double crochet into every stitch, ending the row with a decrease of 3 half double crochets. And the following row is going to start with a decrease of 2 half double crochets and then 1 half double crochet into every stitch. From there, continue to repeat those 2 rows until we have the same amount of underarm rows as the first underarm portion. The entirety of my front panel is all finished. I have a total of 39 rows and my width is just about 12.5 inches or 32 centimeters. Right before we do a chain up of 1 and cut, we are going to single crochet along the top of our piece and then we can repeat. We all should have ended along the top, so from here we're going to chain 1 and start working up our underarm portion. Working our way up our underarm, we're going to alternate between 1 to 2 single crochets into every side row. So starting by finding our first side row, we're going to find that top loop and insert your hook into there with just 1 single crochet. Finding our following side row, this is mine right here, trace that all the way up, find that top loop, and insert your hook into there with 2 single crochets. So there's 1, and then into that same top loop with a second single crochet. And that's it. Let's do one more set. This is my following side row. Find that top loop and insert your hook into there with 1 single. Find your next side row, find that top loop and insert your hook into there with 2 singles. So there's 1, there's 2. Continue to do this until we don't have any more side rows left to work into. I've just worked my way up with my single crochet row and worked into my last underarm row. Before we start working into the top of our piece, we're going to chain 1 and insert your stitch marker into that chain that we made. From there, find our following side row, which shouldn't have a decrease at the end, and insert into there, starting with 1 single crochet. Into that following side row, another set of 2, so there's 1, there's 2, and continue to do this, making our way all the way down until we're ready to work down our underarm again. We have just single crocheted across the top of our piece. Right before we start working on our underarm, we are going to chain 1, insert your stitch marker into that chain 1, and then continue to alternate between 1 to 2 single crochets, working our way down our underarm, starting with 1 single crochet. So there's my first one. Find our following side row, insert your hook into there with 2 single crochets. Continue this until we don't have any more side rows left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then make 1 more identical panel, including the single crochets with the stitch marker in it. I will meet you back when we have 2 of these all finished up. So now that we have both of our panels all finished up, we're now ready to seam everything together. So let's all start by placing our front panel on top of our back panel. We're going to insert our yarn into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. Use our primary color yarn, and we're going to do a single crochet seam. So insert your yarn onto your hook, pull through everything, and then do a chain up of 1 to secure. Now from here, we're all going to start by finding that first available stitch into the front panel and insert your hook in through there. Find that next stitch into the back panel, insert your hook in through there, and if you'd like to weave in your tail ends as you go, just take your tail end and place it over your hook. Now from here, we're going to single crochet per usual, and that's our first single crochet seam, and as you can see, our tail end is in the middle of our single crochet row, so we don't need to weave it in later. Let's do this again. Find that next stitch into the front panel, insert your hook. Find the next stitch into the back panel, insert your hook, single crochet. And that's it. Let's just do 1 more. Next stitch into the front, next stitch into the back, and single. Continue this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and repeat on the other side. Now that everything is seamed together, we're now going to work on our neckline. So grabbing our secondary color yarn, we're going to flip our work right side out, meaning all of the seams are along the inside. Insert our hook into our stitch marker stitch within one of our panels. Insert our yarn onto our hook and pull through. From here, we're going to make a chain in multiples of 3 that reaches all the way up and over our shoulder. That reaches the corner stitch of the other panel that we have. I've already measured mine out. I need a total of 3.5 inches or 9 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain of 15. I have my chain and I've flipped my work. I'm now going to single crochet into the stitch marker stitch within the back panel. So into that stitch, which should be a chain, insert with 1 single crochet, and then single crochet all the way across, including into that stitch marker stitch on the other side. Now that we've single crocheted across, making sure that we worked into that stitch marker stitch, we're going to make the same chain that we made over here. I have flipped my work, and then single crochet it into that stitch marker stitch, and then single crochet our way all the way across. I will meet you back once we've slip stitched into that chain space. Our first neckline row is done. We're going to be doing 1 more, but now within the back loops. But a really quick tip that I have for you guys is make sure that this first single crochet / chain row can fit around our head. This row is going to be as wide as our neckline can fit, so just making sure that it can fit around comfortably. If it's a little too tight, go ahead and add more chains, or if it's too loose, make sure that you take away a couple chains as well. So right after we slip stitch into that chain space, chain 1. We're now going to be working within the back loops. So start by finding our first available chain, insert your hook into that back loop, or the loop that's furthest away from you, single crochet into that following chain, single crochet, and then into that following chain, single crochet. Continue on with our back loop single crochets, including into the stitches that work across the front and back panel, making our way all the way around. Slip stitch into that chain space, do a chain up of 1 and cut when we don't have any more stitches left to work into. Our 2 neckline rows are all finished up. I did do a chain up of 1 and cut. Now I need to prepare for our sleeve. So making sure that our work is slipped right side out, right side up, we are going to insert our hook into the stitch that we have that's nearest to our side seam. Insert our secondary color yarn onto our hook, pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure. From here, since we should already have single crochets in place, put 1 single crochet into every stitch until we reach our stitch marker stitch, or if you've taken yours out, just 1 single crochet into every stitch until we reach our neckline. We've just single crocheted our way all the way up until we reached our stitch marker stitch. Take that stitch marker stitch out, and then insert it into the last single crochet that we just made. This is going to be the underarm portion for our sleeve. Now we need to put 1 single crochet into every stitch that we have working across the bottom of our neckline. So finding that first available stitch, insert your hook in through there, and then single crochet. Put 1 single crochet into every stitch, making our way all the way across. We just worked underneath our neckline, putting 1 single crochet into every stitch. Now we're going to work our way back down our underarm portion. But into that following stitch that we're going to do, that first single crochet worked into the body portion, we're going to be inserting our stitch marker into there because we want the same amount of stitches as this side over here. So into that first stitch, insert your hook with a single crochet and then insert your stitch marker stitch into there. And continue to put 1 single crochet into every stitch and then slip stitch into that chain space. Alright, so now that we have just made our way all the way around with our single crochet row with our secondary color, we're now going to make a chain that is in multiples of 3, the length that we like for our sleeve to be, keeping in mind that we will have a cuff as well. So I'd like for my sleeve to be just about 15.5 inches or 39 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain of 69. Now that we have our chain, we're going to get started with our sedge stitch. So start by blocking off that last chain and do a chain 1. Into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're going to start with our first sedge stitch, which is going to be a half double and a double into that same chain. So yarn over, into that second chain from our hook, insert your hook with a half double, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 3, and then also insert your hook into that same chain with a double. So yarn over, into that same chain, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. That's always going to be our first sedge stitch of every row. From here, we're going to skip the following 2 stitches. So here's 1, here's 2. Into that third chain, we're going to insert now with a single, half double, and then a double. So here's 1, 2, into that third, insert with a single, into that same chain with a half double, and then into that same chain with a double. And from here on out, it's going to be a repeat of this sedge stitch, so let's do this again. Skip 1, skip 2. If we accidentally work into those chains, we'll be accidentally increasing because that half double counts as that first chain, and then that double counts as that second. So we want to make sure that we're skipping 1, 2. Into that third chain, insert with 1 single crochet, also with 1 half double crochet, and then with 1 double crochet, and that's it. Continue to do our sedge stitch until we have 2 chains left. We're nearly done with our row 1. We should have 2 chains left. Into the last chain that we have, we're going to be doing an increase, and how that increase is going to work is going to be 1 single, 1 half double, and then 2 double crochets. So we should have 2 stitches left. Skip that second to last. Into the last, insert with a single, also with a half double, and then 2 double crochets. So here's my first, and then 1 more. Here's my second. We're only going to be increasing into every odd number row. So from here, we're going to slip stitch into the base. We're going to count up 1, count up 2. Into that second stitch into the base, we're going to insert with a slip stitch to close off this row 1. And in order to work our way up to our row 2, slip stitch up just 1 stitch and flip our work. Into every even number row, we will not be doing an increase. So starting with the yarn over, we're going to half double crochet and double crochet into the last stitch from our previous row, because remember, that's how we always do the first sedge stitch. Insert your hook in through there with your half double, and then also with your double, and continue to do our sedge stitch, making our way all the way down. So as a refresher, we're going to skip 1, skip 2. Into that third stitch, insert your hook, now with a single, also with a half double, and then with a double crochet. Just to do one more, skip 1, skip 2. Into that third stitch, single, half double, and double. A quick tip when it comes to getting the texture that we want for our sedge stitch is we're going to make sure that every set that we have, and every set is a single, half double, double, is going to be worked into the previous row's single crochet. So as a refresher, we're skipping 1 and skipping 2. Into that third stitch that we should be working into, it's going to be a single crochet stitch, and you can tell because it's just a little bit lower than the following 2 stitches. So continue to do this until we have 2 stitches left. We've made our way down to the end of our row 2. We should have 1, 2 stitches left. If it looks like you just have 1 stitch, try flipping your work over, and that last stitch could be a little tucked underneath. But once we have those 2 stitches, we're going to yarn over and insert your hook into the last stitch from our previous row with a half double crochet, because this end needs to be blunt. And this is how we're going to close off every even number row. From here, we're going to repeat our 2 previous rows. So chain 1, flip our work, and then our first sedge stitch is always a half double crochet and a double crochet into the last stitch from our previous row. And we're going to continue to do our sedge stitches, making our way all the way down, remembering to increase into the stitch nearest to the base. From here, continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until the last row that is worked into the stitch right before our stitch marker stitch, and then I will meet you back. I'm nearly finished with the increased side of my sleeve. I've worked my way all the way up until I reach that stitch right before my stitch marker stitch, and we should all be along the outer edge. From here, since we just have that last stitch to work into, we're going to do our sedge stitch the same way that we've been doing it. So work your way all the way up, including doing the increase into that last stitch, and I'll meet you back to show you how we're going to connect it into the stitch marker stitch. I've worked my way all the way up, including doing my increase into that last stitch. Now from here, we would typically count up 2 stitches and slip stitch into that second stitch, but since we should all have just 1 stitch left, which is our stitch marker stitch, we're going to insert our hook in through there with a slip stitch just to close off this row. Now from here, we're going to work into the collar portion for our sleeve, and this isn't going to have any increases or decreases. So how we're going to work our way up to the following row is slip stitch into that following stitch. So the same way that we would work our way up to any even number row. Flip your work, and then do our sedge stitches, making our way down with no increases and no decreases. At the end of the row, chain 1, flip our work, and continue to do our sedge stitch, making our way back down towards the base. I'll meet you back when we have just 2 stitches left. So we just finished up our first row when it comes to working into the collar, and we're nearly finished with our second. We should have 2 stitches left, and since we aren't going to be doing any increases or decreases, into the last stitch from our previous row, we're just going to half double crochet. So yarn over, skip the second to last stitch, and then into the last, insert with a half double crochet. And then we're going to connect it into the base per usual. So we're going to skip 1, skip 2, into that second stitch into the base, insert your hook with a slip stitch to close off this row. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch just up 1 stitch, flip our work, and then repeat these 2 rows with no increases and no decreases. And the last row that I'll meet you back on will be worked into the stitch right before our stitch marker stitch. So I've just worked my way across the underneath portion of my collar. The last row that I worked is into the stitch right before my stitch marker stitch, and now we're going to repeat everything that we did on the increase side, but instead of an increase, we're going to be doing a decrease. Since we all should have ended along the base, we're going to work our way up to the following row. So start by slip stitching into that next available stitch into the base, which should be our stitch marker stitch. And we're going to start this row off with a decrease. So now working our way down the decrease side, we're going to start our even number row with a decrease of 3. So what we're going to do is yarn over, insert our hook into the last stitch from our previous row, pull through, insert your hook into that following stitch, pull through, and then into the stitch right after that, and pull through. We should all have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 loops on our hook. So yarn over, pull through all 5, and that's how we do our decrease of 3 half double crochets, and that's going to be how we decrease for every even number row until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. Now from here, just do our sedge stitches all the way down. So like I said in one of our previous clips, each of our sedge stitch sets is going to be worked into the previous row's single crochet. Since this is our single crochet from our previous row, which is that following stitch that we have, insert your hook into there with our first sedge stitch, which is a half double and a double, and then everything from here will be the same. So skip the following 2 stitches, insert your hook into there with a sedge stitch starting with a single, and then into that same stitch a half double and a double, and then skip 2 into that following stitch, single, half double, double, and then repeat. At the end of the row, make sure that we end the row off with a half double crochet into that last stitch, chain 1, flip our work, and then do our sedge stitch all the way back. And now that we've made our way back down with our sedge stitch row, we're right next to the base, so now we're just going to close this row off together. We aren't going to be doing a decrease into this row, so we should have 1, 2, 3 stitches left. All we're going to do is yarn over, skip 1, skip 2, and then into that third, which should be the last stitch from our previous row. Insert with a half double crochet, and this row is all closed off. And just to connect it into the base, we're going to count up 1, count up 2, slip stitch into that stitch to close off this row, and then just to work our way up to the following, slip stitch into that following stitch into the base, flip our work, and then repeat. But all we're going to do from here is just continue to repeat these 2 rows until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, I will meet you back to seam everything together. So now that we've made our way all the way down, we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, we're just going to seam it together. So first things first, we're going to flip our work wrong side out. Next, to do our single crochet seam, we're going to insert our hook in through both the working yarn and through the corner stitch of the front panel, pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure, and now we're just going to do a single crochet seam. So let's all start by inserting our hook into that next available stitch into the front panel, and then also into that next stitch into the back panel, and single crochet. Let's do this again. Into the next stitch into the front panel, next stitch into the back panel, and then single crochet. And then that's basically it. Continue to do this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut. We've just finished up seaming our sleeve, and now we're going to start working on our cuff. So first things first, make sure that our work is flipped right side out, and then we're going to insert our hook into any one of the side rows that we have along the bottom of our sleeve. From here, we will insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure, and we're going to put 1 single crochet into every side row. So just to get this started, this is my first side row that I have right here. I'm going to find that top loop, insert my hook, and single crochet. Let's do the next one. This is my following side row. Insert my hook into that top loop, single crochet, and then that is it. Continue putting 1 single crochet into every side row, and then slip stitch into that chain space. A quick tip, we will have the same amount of single crochets as side rows that we have. Our single crochet row along the bottom is all finished up. We're now going to make a chain the length that we'd like for our cuff to be. And I'd like for my cuff to be just about 3.5 inches or 9 centimeters. So I'm going to start by making a chain of 20. Now that we have our chain, we're going to slip stitch all the way down. So start by blocking off that last chain, chain 1. Into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, insert with a slip stitch. So insert your hook to get 2 loops on your hook. From here, yarn over and gently pull through everything on our hook. There's our first slip stitch. Let's do the next one. Into that following chain, insert your hook, gently yarn over, pull through everything on your hook. Continue to put 1 slip stitch into every chain, and I continue to say gently pull through because if you tug too tightly, the following row could be too tight to work into. Now that we're all the way down to the base, we're going to need to slip stitch it into that next available stitch into the base to connect. Find that next stitch into the base, insert your hook in through there, yarn over, pull through everything to connect our row 1. And to work our way up to our following row, find that next stitch into the base, slip stitch into there, and flip our work. Now we're going to put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So start by finding the last stitch from our previous row, insert your hook in through there, yarn over, pull through everything on our hook. Find the next stitch, insert your hook in through that back loop, yarn over, pull through everything, and then that's it. Put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and at the end of the row, chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch again. I'll meet you back at the base to connect it just once more. We're now at the end of our row 3, so we need to connect it into the base. So find that next stitch into the base, slip stitch into there to close off our row 3, and that's it. Just to work our way up to the following row, find that next stitch into the base, slip stitch into there, flip our work, and then continue on with our back loop slip stitches. From here, just continue to repeat these 2 rows with no increases and no decreases until we don't have any more stitches into the base left to work into, and then we can seam everything together. We've made our way all the way around with our back loop slip stitch rows. We don't have any more stitches left to work into, so now we're going to do an outside loop slip stitch seam. First things first, make sure that our work is flipped right side out. Then we're going to be inserting our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. We're going to yarn over, pull through everything. Now to do our outside loop slip stitch seam, start by finding that first available stitch into the front panel and insert only in through that front loop. Next, find that next stitch into the back panel and insert only in through that back loop. And when we have those 3 loops on our hook, just yarn over and pull through all 3 of those loops. And that's it. Let's do this again. Into the next stitch into the front panel, insert in through that front loop. Next stitch into the back panel, insert into that back loop. Yarn over, pull through all 3 of those loops. And that's it. Continue to do this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up a 1 and cut, and then repeat everything we just did here on the other side. Both of our sleeves and cuffs are finished. Next, we're going to need to insert our stitch marker for the crossover for our hood. So first things first, we're going to need to find that middle stitch within our collar. Now this could be a little different for everyone because we're just going to be eyeballing it, but what I did was I found my first neckline row and my last neckline row, and I just kept counting in, making sure that I counted in 1 row at a time until I found my middle row, and then traced that all the way up and inserted my stitch marker into that top stitch. That is my middle stitch. Right after we find that middle stitch, we're going to need to insert our stitch markers about the width that we want our crossover to be for our hood. Now I want my crossover to be just about 2 inches or 5 centimeters, so making sure that I am counting my middle stitch marker, I counted out 6 stitches and inserted my stitch marker on one side, and then for me another 6 and insert my stitch marker on the other side. If you want your crossover to be more drastic or less drastic, you can make your adjustments now. Just make sure that it's the same amount of stitches on both sides of our middle stitch marker stitch. Now from here we can take out that middle stitch marker stitch because we don't need that anymore. And then we're all going to start by inserting our hook into our right stitch marker stitch's back loop. You're going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure. Now we're going to do our first sedge stitch set into that same stitch that our chain 1 is in. So yarn over, preparing for a half double crochet, into that same stitch, insert with your half double, and then also with your double. And then from here, just like how we did the sleeve, count out 2 stitches into that following stitch's back loop, do our following sedge stitch, which is a single half double and double, all into that same stitch. And that's it. We're going to continue to do this until we reach our following stitch marker stitch. And now that I've reached my stitch marker stitch along this side, we're going to continue on with the same sedge stitch with nothing fancy, but now we don't need to be working within the back loops. So just to show you guys, I'm going to count out 2 stitches again. So this is my following stitch. And if your stitch marker stitch isn't your next stitch, that's completely fine as well, because everyone's numbers are going to be just a little bit different for this section. So I'm going to count out 1, count out 2. Into that following, I'm going to insert into that loop with a single, a half double, and then a double. And we're going to continue to do our regular sedge stitches, making our way all the way around, and I'll meet you back once we reach this stitch marker stitch along the other side. I've made my way all the way around with my sedge stitches, and I'm now at my following stitch marker stitch. From here, we're going to be working into the front loops that we left for ourselves, since for the first half of the section, we were working into the back loops. So I actually have 2 stitches right before my following stitch marker stitch. If you guys just have 1, that's completely fine as well. Just continue on with the sequence per usual, just making sure that we're working in through those available front loops. Now for me, I'm going to skip 1, skip 2, into that following stitch, which is my stitch marker stitch. Yours doesn't have to be the stitch. I'm going to insert my hook into there with my sedge stitch. So again, just a single half double double. And then I'm going to continue to do this, making my way all the way down until I reach my following stitch marker stitch. Now we're going to stop once when we are about 1 or 2 stitches away from that stitch. Because we want to end this row on a half double crochet, but it could be a little bit different for everyone because everyone has a different number of stitches. I've just finished up my last sedge stitch. My last set was into the stitch right before my stitch marker stitch. If yours was one behind, or if you guys have 2 stitches available, that's fine as well. All we're going to do is half double crochet into that stitch marker stitch because the end of this row needs to be blunt. Now from here, all of our following sedge stitch rows are going to be pretty simple. We're just going to chain 1, flip our work, and just do our sedge stitch the same way that we've been doing it, but with no increases and no decreases. So at the very end, we're going to have 2 available stitches left. Just half double crochet into that last stitch and then repeat. Like I said, we aren't going to be doing any increases or decreases, so just continue on with that row until we get the length of the hood that we need. Once we have that, I will meet you back so we can seam it together. My hood is all finished up. I have a total of 46 rows, and my height is just about 15 inches or 38 centimeters. And now from here, we're going to seam it together. So making sure that our work is flipped right side out and right side up, we're going to take the 2 corner stitches that we have, pinch them together, and then we're going to flip them inside out because a single crochet seam needs to be along the inside. Now to do the single crochet seam, we're going to pull our working yarn through, chain 1, and then start by inserting your hook into that first stitch into the front panel, into that next stitch, into the back panel, and then single crochet them together. So pretty simple. Continue to do this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut. Now that our hood is all seamed up, we are all done. Last thing we're going to have to do is just weave in all of our ends. And there you have it, guys. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Catch you on the next one. Bye!